Welcome to Time of Death. This video is for informational purposes and in no way meant to glorify or condone violence. In today's video, we'll be discussing the murder of Henry Richard Arnal. Arnal was shot and killed on Tuesday, December 4th, 2018 in the 5500 block of Norwich Avenue in El Sereno, according to LA County coroner records. Angel Osvaldo Tinajero was subsequently arrested and charged with the murder. The following is the evidence at trial. Defendant Tinajero was a member of El Sereno gang. He lived at his mother's house with his then girlfriend, Ms. Magallon. Sometimes he borrowed his girlfriend's gray Nissan Altima. On two occasions in May and November of 2018, Ms. Magallon noticed defendant carrying a gun. On December 3rd, 2018, Ms. Magallon spent the night with defendant at his mother's house. When she woke up the next day, defendant was gone, along with her car and cell phone. That same morning, victim Henry Arnal called his brother, identified at trial as Michael, and asked him for help with his van that had broken down. Michael, who's a mechanic, agreed to help. The victim told Michael, "I'm on Sheffield," which Michael knew was an avenue in El Sereno, an East LA neighborhood. Michael had a really bad feeling that something was gonna go down. The victim, an El Sereno gang member, had been released from prison a few months earlier. Since his release, the victim had been staying at his mother's house away from El Sereno, which meant the victim was having problems with his gang. Sheffield Avenue was inside El Sereno gang territory. Michael was a longtime member of a different gang, the Garrity Loma gang. Michael told the victim that it would take him about an hour to get there. He texted his girlfriend, "Hey, if anything happens to me, I'm on Sheffield with my brother." Michael drove directly to El Sereno. Around noon, Michael arrived at the corner of Sheffield and Norwich. The victim walked down the driveway, approached the van parked on the sidewalk, and said, "Let me unlock the van." Michael did not see the victim holding a gun, but testified he could have had one because it was second nature for the victim to have a gun, given he was a gang member. Michael looked in his rearview mirror and saw a gray Nissan Altima, which he later identified at trial as Ms. Magallon's car, pulling up behind him. Before the Nissan came to a full stop, a man Michael later identified as defendant jumped out of the front passenger side with a gun in his hand and made eye contact with the victim. The victim, who did not appear to be holding a gun, immediately ran behind the van where Michael could no longer see him. Defendant chased after the victim and fired his gun at him. Michael testified it sounded like defendant shot the entire clip he had. A second shooter seated in the backseat of the Nissan fired a gun out the window. Michael reversed his car and smashed into the Nissan. The Nissan then drove away. Defendant emerged from behind the van with a gun in his hand and ran off. Michael drove after him. Defendant ran down a driveway and threw the gun down. When defendant reached the garage at the end of the driveway, Michael tried to smash him with his car but missed and crashed into the garage. Michael got out of his car, ran up to defendant and fought him. Michael testified defendant was wearing shooter's clothes. An example, he was wearing multiple layers and gloves that would make it easier to quickly dispose of evidence. Meanwhile, a witness who was staying at the house at the end of the driveway heard a crash and a loud boom. She ran outside to find a car had hit the garage and two men were fighting. She also saw a gun on the ground on the side of the house. She picked it up with a towel and called 911. Around noon, Officer Hugo Vasquez from the LAPD responded to the scene and found Michael holding down defendant in the backyard. Officer Vasquez arrested defendant, who was out of breath, appeared tired, and had blood on his face. The witness gave Officer Vasquez the firearm, which contained no unspent bullets. Another officer detained Michael, who did not have any weapons on him. LAPD Officer Eric Ramirez found the victim lying on the ground near the van. The victim died later that day of a gunshot wound to the torso. He had a total of 4 gunshot wounds in his abdomen, buttocks, thigh, and calf. 2 gunshots entered the front of his body and 2 entered his back. 2 bullets were recovered, one from the victim's right upper back and another from his lower leg. At the scene of the shooting, LAPD Detective Vincent Carrion found 12 spent .40 caliber cartridge casings and 1 spent .45 caliber casing. Several were near the van, including the .45 caliber casing, and 3 .40 caliber casings were on the roadway. A folding knife with its blade exposed was on the sidewalk near the victim's body. At approximately 12:16 p.m., LAPD Officer Rodolfo Pardo responded to a call of a vehicle left at scene at an intersection 1/3 of a mile from the shooting. He found a gray Nissan Altima abandoned with its engine running. It had collision damage and a flat tire, and the passenger windows on one side of the car had been shot out. There were two .45 caliber cases on the driver's seat and two more in the back seat. Michael identified the abandoned Nissan as the vehicle involved in the shooting. LAPD criminalist Matthew Salcedo analyzed the firearm and bullet casings recovered from the crime scenes. The serial number on the recovered firearm had been manually removed. After test firing the firearm, Salcedo determined it had fired the 12 recovered .40 caliber bullet casings. He also determined that a different unknown firearm fired the 4 .45 caliber casings recovered from the Nissan. Detective David Manriquez performed a cell phone extraction on the victim's cell phone, extracting all text conversations between the victim and a contact named Saint Little. Defendant's gang moniker was Little Saint. On December 2nd, 2 days before the murder, Saint Little texted the victim, "How have you been, my boy?" The next day, they exchanged several text messages. The victim told Saint Little that he was in El Sereno. After the victim's murder, Michael learned that the victim had been on a green light list. A green light is a license to kill or death warrant. If a person is on the green light list, any gang member from any area, any turf, has a right to take you out if they are aware that you have the green light. Michael testified that when it came out that he intervened in the victim's murder, his gang immediately put him on the green light list. The fact that both the victim and Michael were on the green light list gave Michael pause in cooperating with the prosecution. After defendant's arrest, officers placed an undercover informant posing as a fellow inmate in defendant's jail cell and secretly recorded their conversation. This tactic is commonly called the Perkins operation. The people played the entire recording of the Perkins operation for the jury. Defendant told the informant he was in jail for a murder. The informant asked him, "The guy you shot at, did you hit him?" Defendant said, "I think." Defendant added that he fired the whole clip from his gun. When the informant asked defendant how he got his injuries, defendant said he was running down the street and a car pulled out of nowhere. He kept running, but at some point his gun fell out. A few feet from where his gun fell, he ran into a house and the car that was chasing him crashed behind him. A man got out of the car and started beating him. The informant said, "You can say that it was self-defense." Defendant responded, "I had gloves on." The informant warned defendant that if the victim had a relative inside the jail, defendant could get whacked. Defendant assured the informant that as far as what happened, he was covered. He had the right of way. He got the green light and everything from his brothers from his barrio. The informant said, "At least you did your job," to which defendant replied, "Yeah." Later, the informant said, "The dude must have done something wrong." Defendant responded, "Yeah, they did." Following the trial, the jury found defendant guilty of first-degree murder and possession of a firearm by a felon. On July 11, 2022, the court sentenced defendant Tinajero to a total aggregate term of 50 years to life, consisting of 25 years to life for the murder and 25 years to life for the firearm enhancement. Henry Richard Arnal was 37 years old at the time of death.